All right, everyone, we've hit 9:03. Thanks everyone who has joined in today. This is the first of two sessions we're going to do. And really, it is a reflection of some of the trends we've been seeing in the marketplace. A lot of this coming what we saw at InfoComm, especially the new technology in that. So we'll get going here. What I just want to do is, I think most of you know who I am, but I will do a quick introduction on Data Visual and myself. Data Visual, as many of you know, is a Canadian-owned, family-owned company headquartered in Ottawa, and we will be opening, or we have been opening, but we're going to celebrate the opening of our Calgary warehouse next Thursday, July 24th. So if any of you happen to be in that part of the world that day, please register and come and see us for some. We're going to have about 30 tables there from the vendors, um, some entertainment, good food, all that sort of thing, what Alberta can do. Was a resident there for 31 years, so I'm still part Albertan, I think. My role, part of the role that I have as the senior market specialist within Data Visual is being responsible for the education programs and things that we do within the education sector. When we say education, we mean everything from K to 12 right through to higher education. And so I've been doing that for a few months now across Canada and look forward to seeing a lot of you at our upcoming data visual and display shows. But let's get right into our presentation now. So let's do that. Well, let's go here. So the agenda for this morning, we're going to look at trends first for some classroom and meeting spaces. I think it's important that we look at both sides of the equation because I know in talking with many of you that you have responsibilities in those areas. So that's there. So we'll examine the trends for both. And a lot of times they converge and cross over and are one and the same. Then we'll look at some of the technology solutions and how they are reflected in answering these trends. And then we'll open it up to a question and answer period. Okay, some of the trends, inclusive and equitable meetings. I'm going to have to do a little spell check there. They are still there. They're still being in demand. They were hastened by COVID. They were starting to happen, 5, 6 years ago. COVID really pushed that forward. There is an ongoing demand for that within the education sector. And what within that area, and we'll touch about in general some of the solutions there, what we're seeing is video and audio companies starting to partner up to help bring an inclusive and equitable solution for both audio and video. And we'll talk about some of those solutions down a few more minutes. I'm not going to address Dante specifically in any of the solutions because it's becoming an overriding theme in a lot of the solutions. A few years ago, Dante was an audio solution that's growing. We're seeing it in audio. We're seeing it in video. We're now seeing it in AV over IP as well. So we'll hear references to Dante AVA and Dante AVH. AVA is obviously the higher end for 4K 60 sub-frame latency. Dante AVH is 4K 60 222. A little bit of latency, a couple of frames of latency. So I don't mention it specifically in the solutions, but we're seeing it in cameras, we're seeing it in AV over IP, we're seeing it in audio. So Dante is definitely growing in its reach. Another trend we're seeing now that we've moved away from the COVID period, small rooms and huddle rooms are back. And what we're seeing is there's product designed to meet those specific type of rooms. USB 3.2 is out there. It is becoming more and more important as we're trying to send higher video frame rates, higher video resolution, higher audio all through the system. Signal distance is always concerned with USB, and so we're starting to see some solutions that are made to address these specific needs. Another thing we're starting to see, it's starting to grow. I would say it's in its infancy stage, but we are starting to see it, and that is digital signage in meeting spaces. This is to enhance the customer experience, generate ROI for the room. And what we're seeing is that the CMS companies are using existing gear as media players so that we're not having to buy an extra media player for the space, but we can use a wireless collaboration device, or maybe the SoC chips on the monitors. We are also starting to see all-in-one video wall solutions starting to show up. This is more so in executive meeting spaces and the higher education, key classrooms, high traffic classrooms, where there's a lot of eyes on those classrooms or those meeting spaces. We're starting to see all-in-one solutions. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Another trend, and this is one that I'm really curious about because it's not one that I've particularly experienced, but we've been asked about it by manufacturers and that. So I'd love to hear your feedback on it. And we'll talk a little bit more about it in the solution area, but see the words during the meeting. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about transcription. Discussion systems, there's been a lot with hybrid solutions having microphones, in ceilings or on the wall and that. What we're starting to see in a few cases where there is a need to put it on the table, on the desk, rooms within the rooms, may incorporate video even. We've seen it in some classrooms, but we're also seeing it in meeting spaces, whether that be an executive meeting room or a trustee meetings room. We're seeing a lot of that type of solution show up there. Another real growing trend is accessibility. There's a growing demand for hearing assistance. In the past, this has really been a K-12, where K-12 was asking, we need to put this in the room. We need our teachers to have it so that their voices are saved. We need to have it for students so they can hear better, and was really driven towards those with hearing aids and who needed that special assistance. Auracast technology is leading the way. What Auracast is, it's a low energy Bluetooth solution. It's part of that. However, it is designed for broadcast versus one-to-one. So we'll talk a little bit of this when we get to the solutions. So now what I want to do is maybe take a second. Any comments or questions to this point? I will try and monitor the chat. If you want to put it in there, if you just want to ask questions, go ahead. Just simply because I don't have my partner here. She's busy doing some other stuff, so she's not really here to watch the chat, but I will try and do that. Okay, let's go and talk about some technology solutions that are addressing the trends that we just talked about. One of the new products that was shown at InfoComm came from Hudley, and what we've seen in Hudley in the past year is a growth in their product. They have what they call the Crew product, where you can have up to 5 cameras in a room space, all working together to bring that inclusivity of the meeting there. We're probably going to see like 7 or even more cameras be part of that solution. However, that is really for usually a medium to large room. So what they've done is they've come out with a solution, an all-in-one solution. Not that, we know there's a lot of all-in-one solutions out there, but they've came out with their own. It looks very different. If you haven't seen it, it looks very different than the traditional all-in-one, which tends to be, look like a video bar and that. This is a square rectangle box. You can even get 4 different colored faceplates for just to kind of set it off in the room and that. And they built that box specifically to get the higher quality audio that they wanted. They knew they had the right cameras. Obviously they're a camera company. And so what they really developed this is to fit into that medium size to smaller room, that 20-foot distance, what Microsoft defines as that medium size room. One of the interesting things about the C1 is that it will be Google certified as well as Teams and Zoom certified. Google's probably see it a little bit more out in the education marketplace, but I do have corporate customers that I work with who basically are Google shops. And so this is a camera that will be Google certified. I mentioned the Crew solution. Come December with some firmware updates, they're planning to incorporate the C1 as part of the Crew solution. So you could have, the Crew sitting, out the front there, and then maybe because of the width of the room or some other nature, you just want to have more camera tracking, you can make it as one of the crew cameras. Um, in some rooms, that may allow you to be even in those, where you would typically not use an all-in-one, but where you've got extra cameras. It can now be the solution for audio and video in that same room. Okay, so that's a Huddley C1. Oh, let's go over here. Yes, they did have it at InfoComm TIA. So go that. The Nareva HDX, this is a new addition to the Nareva line. It looks very different than the HDL 300s and 310s and 410s that we've seen before, and there's extra components. So what it does, it sort of at the tail end of where the HDL 410 is, it now goes beyond that. So you can actually now do rooms that are up to 40 by 60 with all the component. You use all the components, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Their starting point where they suggest is rooms that are like 35 by 35. And to achieve this room sizing, you use different combinations. You would use, in smaller rooms, you could use 2 bars. In the larger rooms, you'd use 4 bars. Now, if you notice, the bars are mounted differently. And so you could have them mounted, in different parts of the room, but you could have them at the front of the room. Different. Now, with these, they shoot the microphone mist and the virtual microphones. It's a direct push out now. So you don't need that backing behind them. So there's more flexibility in mounting them, which makes them easier to use in, for example, theater style rooms. The specs aren't as tight, when you use an HDL 300 or 400 series right now, there's some fairly tight specs you have to meet. Very different here on these ones. So you don't have to use 4 bars, but you can do that. Now, the two little, and I'll just go back here. So these are the bars themselves. These are what are called pods, okay? And we'll just talk about that on here now. There we go. You can have up to 2 pods, and pods are used for voice lift application. We'll talk a little bit more about there. So they don't, they're just for voice lift. You can't use them separately by themselves or anything like that. They're used in conjunction with the bars. As I mentioned, mounting specs are not as stringent. So once again, it gives that ability to work in those theater style rooms. Absolutely, just as the other ones are, divisible rooms capable. They've also spent a lot of time on improving the audio, so you get a wider range of audio, both on the lower and higher end frequencies, so that if you had to play audio in a room, you're doing just a presentation, it's not a hybrid meeting, simply an in-room meeting, but maybe you're playing a short video or something of that nature. This is a much more better quality sound than what they achieved before. Voice lift, obviously, with the pauses we talked about, voice lift is part of the solution. So it's adaptive voice lift. So it lifts it as much as it needs to within the room. Once again, adaptive voice amplification, so that you can amplify the voice within the room. And so you can have up to 4 wireless mics with it. Speaking about the wireless mics, you can use lapel, you can use handheld, headset. So it's a much wider range and scope of wireless microphones that you can use with the solution now. Something that we'll address in a little bit more in regards to accessibility is the fact that this will be an Auracast capable product. So they're jumping on the Auracast bandwagon, which is really cool to see, and it will be a very positive feature for them, I think. I want to talk a little bit about immersive. Immersive in the education field has tended to be, active learning classrooms, that sort of thing. They came in there. Some sharing in that obviously is used there. What we've seen with immersive, this go around, they have come out with their collaboration suite, as they call it, which has got 3 portions to it. So what they've wanted to do with this suite is they want it to be very scalable. So there is the first one is what we call Immersive Smart. It is software only. It's designed for smart TV and streaming devices. So, within that huddle space where you might have that sort of thing. So it's that really basic, down to earth, just keep it simple type of sharing. The next product is Immersive Essentials. It uses the Immersive Element, as the box. Once again, smaller spaces. The focus is on sharing information within that space. So, once again, huddle spaces. We're able to do wireless screen sharing, and you can have multi-users interacting within that space. Then at the top end of it, this is where they really, get into the same playing field as things like ClickShare, um, and other wireless collaboration devices where you can now bring peripherals into it and that. It's called Immersive Pro, so it's a Generation 4 box, so it's a brand new box they've come out with. Really is their premium offering, and there are subscription based on the tiers you want in that. So there's a much more robust type of solution for that collaboration space where you want to do video conferencing, whether it be a Teams or Zoom type of call. ClickShare Hub. This is, for someone, I'm not sure how many of you know this, for a couple of years within Data Visual, I was Data Visual's ClickShare development manager focused on ClickShare. And one of the discussions we always had was, well, what do we do about MTRs as ClickShare? In my mind, they were the biggest competition we actually had, in the sense that, there's a lot of rooms going MTR, and they weren't looking as much as ClickShare. So ClickShare kind of fit into an accessory to an MTR room. We've seen that, develop where it was, where you could use a ClickShare C series as inputs into the MTR devices to add content. Then the CX50 Gen 2 came out where it allowed you to switch, if you had an MTR room, to switch to a Zoom room or to a WebEx room. So we were kind of working with the MTRs. ClickShare with now has released what they call their ClickShare Hub, and it is an MTR solution. So it's got the MTR built into it. So you can see, on the right-hand side, the little diagrams and illustrations I have where you can see there, they've got the screen, the one-touch screen to launch meetings and that. So they definitely are an MTR. They have two solutions, the Hub Core, which is sort of like the CX20. So it's, smaller, single screen type of solution. Hub Pro is more like the CX50 Gen 2, where you can have dual monitors, higher end type of solution. ClickShare is one, or Barco, is one of the few partners with Microsoft who are part of the MDEP process. So what that does, so Steve, yes, it is a Android MTR, and we'll touch a little bit base on that as well. MDEP, Microsoft device protocol. There's only a few companies who've done that. What that does is, because it is an Android device, and there's a lot of always concern about, what is Android here, what is Android, because they are following the Microsoft protocol, and Microsoft developed this so that they could manage the Android, so that there's, greater security. There was consistency to it. It wasn't, that, okay, it's this Android version or this, this is the Android version we're using. You're part of MDEP. All of your MTR devices have to be following the current version. So there's that interconnectivity. So Barco joined a year or maybe even a little bit longer ago. It is an Android device. When asked, they have said quite plainly at this point that they do not have any plans for making that a Windows-based MTR. They're simply going to stick with MDEP. That's where they're, kind of set their standards at, and that's how they're going to proceed with MTR solutions. I want to talk a little bit about Lumens, because they have been a real leader when we talked about video and audio working together. They've developed a lot of solutions for that, and and they have really been voice tracking. I'll take a second here. a lot of times, customers will say, we want voice tracking. And you kind of have to define what they mean by that. There's the old voice tracking, we had the IR lanyard and you just fold one person around. A lot of times what we're really looking at is like AI tracking and different modes, speaker mode, all kinds of different modes that you can have. And so that's, where we come in and make sure that we understand what tracking is in that. Lumens has done a lot of work in working with multiple audio companies, microphone companies and speaker companies, using their Cam Connect Pro. What that does, it allows someone to track within the room and that, and with their using the cameras and that. And you can have, depending on the solution, kind of up to 3 to 4 cameras. There's different solutions they work with their Cam Connect. A couple of things that they have released that kind of builds on that is they have a multi-voice tracking mode, and that's using their camera, the new camera, the VC-TR60A. And so this is a mode where it can pick the voices out from multiple voices, and so a more precise, accurate tracking. They also have come out with zone-based voice tracking using the Cam Connect Pro. Once again, this is when you have multiple cameras. You can set zones, and so when it hears it, it'll go to that zone. So it uses a voice more than just the torso tracking and that. And that's what we're seeing. For example, Hudley does the same thing. Their cameras within the cruise system have a microphone built into them, not for sending it to the far side, but simply to pick up the voice. They pick up the voice, and then they start doing torso and facial tracking and that. So that's what we're starting to see more and more, and that's where Lumens has come up with some solutions. Managing USB 3.2. We all know that USB has a certain distance limitation to it, and so what we're seeing is solutions that have come out that address the ability to extend 3.2. Two, I'll mention that we work with the Hall Discovery 3 system. You can have it in, you've got your transmitter and you've got your receiver, and you can have wall plates as that transmitter to the receiver as well. So a couple of different ways. They rate theirs at 90 meters. And then we have the Turtle, which is a brand new company, by the way, out of Australia. So, if you refer back to our previous discussion on tariffs, we don't worry about that coming from Australia. They've come out with a number of new products. They're a brand new company. They just launched within the last year, and they're winning a number of awards in that. They have a Turtle USB 3.2 extender. They rate theirs at 100 meters, so a little bit longer than that. Once again, they have a receiver and a transmitter. What's common between both of these solutions and most of the solutions that you see in this space is that you need Cat 6A or Cat 7 to do it. And you only need to power one end. You can choose which end you need to power, and that will power both ends in. So that's just one of the common features between both of those solutions. Talking a little bit about digital signage and meeting spaces. This is something that is, as I said earlier, it's in an infancy stage, and we're starting to see more questions about it, more inquiries as to how it can be used and how it can, help your situation. So a couple of things, what putting it into meeting spaces does, it enhances the visitor experience. So, you've got a key customer coming in or a key presenter. You want to, enhance them, make them feel welcome in that. They can walk into their meeting space that they're going to be presenting, and they're a guest presenter. And before they launch, their presentation, they walk into the room and they see a welcome type of sign. Or maybe you're advertising, a class that you're having, announcing a new class, or putting up a class schedule so people can see it. So it kind of improves your ROI. It's a way to tell your story. Maybe there's something happening within your department or with your college, what have you, and you want to get that out of there. Where we're typically seeing this is when people walk into a meeting space or an area where there's meeting rooms. They have glass walls so you can see it through there. So that's one way to do it, especially if you want to get that general information package out. or even, as I mentioned before, within a closed room where you would, person can walk in and see that. I'm just going to, because carousel is one of our leading lines, and especially in the education marketplace, has been really a leader for us. Um, they're adding compatibility. So what we're seeing is they will work with a ClickShare device. They will work with immersive device as the endpoint so that you don't have to have a separate media player to doing this. It's simply running through those wireless collaboration solutions. They're also adding OS solutions so that, whether it be an LG OS or a Samsung, they're working on that one right now. You can connect that way, and so you can have your digital signage that way. They also have added features like Express Player and Daily, and really what those do is allow you to individualize and really focus on a certain group. So the Express Player is, if someone wants to use their phone to see the digital signage, they can do that. The Daily is where, let's say, you've got maybe your history department. You want to send everything out to everyone who teaches history, whether it be in the K to 12 or history professors, because you've got some information in that. So it's a way to have a very specific group of people. They just use it as a widget on their device, both Windows and Apple. And so that's another way that we're seeing digital signage come up in these collaboration spaces. All-in-one video walls. Once again, we're seeing this in some classrooms. We've done some projects in classrooms. We've done some projects in executive boardrooms or trustee rooms and that. And a lot of times what we're doing is we're replacing a large screen and high-end projector and that. So that's kind of solutions where we're putting in those kind of rooms. The resolution is based usually typically on a 16:9 ratio. Aspect ratio, and then the corresponding pixel pitch. So it's really an out-of-the-box solution. Here it is. You're buying the whole kit. It's got the HDMI inputs and all of that in. It's very easy to use because you're not trying to manipulate pixels. It's all a standard ratio. For us, we've got Planar, Samsung, ViewSonic. They all offer this solution. So glad to talk to you about that at any time. Once again, I'm going to transcription and meeting, and once again, it's audio what's going to be said. And the reason I brought it up was I was fortunate enough to attend a roundtable that was talking about collaboration in particular, and it was a roundtable. And they said that this was an up and coming trend, and I wondered, if you get asked this for your classrooms, it's one way for people to see what's see the words, kind of thing. So I bring this up more as let me know what you're hearing about this in the future. I'd love to do that because we are looking at these kind of solutions for ourselves. Discussion systems. Once again, this is where the microphones are going on the table. In a more complex and integrated setup, you may even include video, which I've shown in that little picture there. For example, in some universities where we've done this solution in their council chambers or their trustee chambers, it's the only audio in the room because the microphone and the speaker are both built into the stand. And what we've seen, because we're starting to see more of this where there are certain rooms, this is not an every room situation, but there are some classrooms, distributed learning classrooms, we've seen it. We see it in that executive, higher end meeting room where you can have the executives coming into it and that. Televic's been developing some of these solutions. Sort of their entry level is the Discerno. This is where would tend to be something you're in your classroom. You might be able to share 2 students for 1 microphone. It can very often used in video conferencing because you can take the audio out and put it onto like a Teams or a Zoom platform and use it as your video conferencing microphone system. And the Discerno's been around for quite a while, but what they have done is the control box, they've improved that so that you can record the class as well as send out the audio on that. So that's what we're seeing more in the classroom type of solution. Another one we're seeing is called the Unicos Core. The Unicos is the system that you see in council chambers where they've got the screens and a microphone all in one stand. What the core does is strips out some of the more things that are needed more in a government situation, kind of pared it down. You don't have the voting, different things in that. So, brings the cost down for you. And so we're starting to see that into executive type meeting rooms. Accessibility. Let's see here. Okay, we'll look at that. Accessibility. This tends to be focused on assisted hearing. As I mentioned earlier, it has been predominantly a K-12 demand. However, higher ed is now growing that demand. And so we're seeing it in higher ed more and more. And some of you on the call, I know we've talked to it about already. As I mentioned, Auracast is the key solution being discussed. It's what's called a low energy form of Bluetooth and its ability to broadcast. Right now, the Bluetooth that we typically use, it's a one-to-one. Whereas Auracast will allow you to use, for example, I made sure that the hearing aids that I have are going to be Auracast compatible, but it could be receivers. The latest versions of smartphones are capable of Auracast. Headsets are capable of Auracast. So now you can have a group of people, in a classroom. Some may have, like I said, hearing aids. Some may just bring in a headset because they just need to hear a little bit better. They're not, they just want to hear better. So it allows a real flexibility to go into a classroom, to have that audio come through, and a lot of people have better hearing. And once again, we all know that the better you hear, the more you learn. So so Auracast is really growing in use. We started hearing the rumble a year ago about it. It's going to continue to grow, and most people are really firm as you read the literature that within the next 2 to 3 years, it is going to become the dominant solution. I look at hearing aids. We've gone from, just a straight Bluetooth hearing aid to Auracast capable hearing aids. And it's growing. We're seeing more solutions being built around the Auracast solution. For example, I mentioned earlier, the Nareva HDX is going to be Auracast capable. Listen has been the real market leader. They've got an Ori solution, that's got the receiver, it's got the transmitter, charging devices, and all that. So once again, with the Auracast, you don't necessarily have to buy the receiver, and so it's got a lot less issues. Wi-Fi's tended to be in this space a little bit. Doesn't have the latency issues. There's also ways you can manipulate. They were showing us at InfoComm how it resets for every class, so that a lot of the, it kind of sets itself for each class in that. So it becomes a much more open solution in that. So thanks. Have a great day, everybody.